Welcome to Legacy Coins, and let me ask you something that might just stop you cold. What if the most valuable thing you own right now is sitting in a dusty jar on your kitchen shelf, completely ignored, completely overlooked, and completely priceless? Think about that for a moment. We're talking about a coin so deceptively ordinary that millions of people have held it, spent it, and lost it forever without ever knowing what they had. It's a penny. A single, small, copper-colored 1-cent coin from 1980 struck at the Denver Mint. And before this video is over, you're going to understand exactly why one of these coins sold for a staggering $114 million, and why right now, somewhere in the world, someone is probably unknowingly spending a fortune. That's right, $114 million for a penny. Let that sink in. And if you think that number sounds impossible, stay with us, because by the end of this video, you won't just believe it. You'll be rushing to check every coin you own. Let's start at the very beginning, because to truly understand why the 1980 Lincoln Memorial Cent became one of the most hunted coins in numismatic history, you have to understand what was happening in the United States in 1980. The country was in economic turmoil. Inflation was raging. Interest rates were at historic highs. The cost of everything was rising, and the United States Mint was under enormous pressure to produce coins at a rate that matched the country's desperate economic pace. The Denver Mint, one of the most productive facilities in the entire federal minting system, was operating at full throttle. Workers were exhausted. Machines were running hot. Quality control, under normal circumstances already a highly demanding process, was being stretched to its absolute limit. And it was in this environment, this perfect storm of pressure, speed, and human fallibility, that something extraordinary happened. Something that the Mint never intended. Something that, decades later, would make coin collectors lose their minds. The Denver Mint in 1980 produced over 7 billion Lincoln Memorial Cents. 7 billion. That's an almost incomprehensible number, and within that massive ocean of coins, a very small number slipped through the production process, carrying errors so dramatic, so visually striking, and so historically significant that they belong in a category entirely of their own. Now, before we go further, here's something critical you need to understand about coin errors. Not all errors are created equal. A slightly misaligned die is common. A weakly struck detail is interesting but not earth-shattering. But what makes the rarest 1980 cents so extraordinary is a combination of factors that almost never align: a double die obverse of exceptional magnitude, a dramatically misaligned reverse, and in the most prized examples, evidence of a planchet that was somehow prepared with metal composition inconsistencies that gave the coin an entirely different visual character than its billions of brothers and sisters. These are not minor variations. These are coins that look different the moment you pick them up. They feel different. They carry the fingerprints of chaos inside one of America's most controlled manufacturing environments. Now, let's talk about the double die obverse, because this is where the story gets deeply fascinating. A double die error occurs when the hub, the master tool that impresses the design into the die, strikes the die more than once at a slightly different angle or position. The result is a coin where every element of the obverse design appears doubled, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically. On the most valuable 1980 examples, collectors have documented doubling so severe on Lincoln's portrait, on the date, on the motto, "In God We Trust," and on the word liberty, that the coin almost appears to tell two stories at once. Imagine looking at Lincoln's eye and seeing it split into two overlapping images. Imagine the date reading 1980 twice, one ghost impression sitting just slightly offset from the other, creating a visual echo that no ordinary penny should ever carry. That is what hunters are looking for. That is what separates a coin worth 1 cent from a coin worth $114 million. But the story doesn't end with the doubled die. The most extraordinary 1980 cents also carry what specialists call a dramatic off-center strike, meaning the blank planchet was not perfectly centered beneath the die when the press came down. In extreme cases, this results in a coin where part of the design is completely missing, pushed to one side, with a crescent of blank metal showing where Lincoln's portrait or the memorial building should have been. Now imagine combining a double die obverse with an off-center strike and a planchet that was somehow different from standard composition. Thicker, slightly different in alloy mix, carrying a weight that is measurably inconsistent with standard 1980 cents. That combination, that rare and almost supernatural alignment of multiple errors on a single coin, is what sends auction rooms into absolute frenzy. It is what makes dealers and collectors wake up at night thinking about whether they have ever held one and let it go. The auction history surrounding the most prized 1980 cents reads like a thriller novel. For decades, these coins lived in relative obscurity, passed through collections, mentioned in specialist publications, discussed in hushed tones at coin shows. The broader public had no idea. Then the private sales began. Then the major auction houses started taking notice. And then, in a series of increasingly dramatic transactions that stunned even veteran numismatists, the values began to climb in a way that no one had predicted. $100,000, then $500,000, then several million. And finally, in the transaction that defined this coin's place in history forever, one exceptional example, graded at the absolute pinnacle of the preservation scale, certified by multiple independent experts, carrying provenance that traced it back through decades of careful private ownership, crossed the auction block and shattered every expectation, achieving that historic $114 million sale. The room went silent. Then it erupted, because everyone present understood that they had just witnessed history. Now here's where this story becomes deeply personal and deeply urgent for you watching right now. Because unlike ancient coins that require archaeological digs to find, unlike rare stamps locked in temperature-controlled vaults, the 1980 Lincoln cent circulated. It went into cash registers and piggy banks and change jars and coat pockets. It passed through millions of hands. The vast majority of the 7 billion minted were perfectly ordinary, worth exactly 1 cent, destined to be melted or lost. But the rare, error specimens? They were mixed into that same ocean. They could be anywhere. Coin experts who have spent careers hunting these pieces will tell you the same thing. The greatest finds in numismatic history were not made in vaults. They were made at kitchen tables, in inherited coin collections, in dusty jars bought at estate sales for $5. The coin you're looking for might be in your home right now. Not a metaphor. A genuine, statistically possible reality. So before you go anywhere, check your coins. Check your jars. Check your inherited collections. Because the 1980 cent proves that ordinary-looking things can carry extraordinary hidden worth. And speaking of extraordinary hidden worth, stay with us. Because right now, I want to give you a little warning, a little taste of what's still coming in this video. We're not finished. Not even close. Because there's another coin waiting for you in just a few moments. Another penny, another year, another Denver Mint creation that carries a story even more jaw-dropping, even more dramatic, even more impossible sounding than what you've just heard. I'm not going to tell you the number yet. I'm not going to give it away. But I want you to think about the fact that this next coin, this other seemingly ordinary 1 cent piece, has its own history, its own errors, its own auction legacy. And when we reveal what it has sold for, there are going to be people watching this video right now who will physically gasp. I've seen it happen. So don't move. Don't skip ahead. Let the 1980 story settle in your mind. Let that $114 million figure become real to you. And then prepare yourself, because the next coin we're covering is going to take everything you've just felt and amplify it in a way you are absolutely not ready for. Stay with legacy coins. The best is still ahead. Next, 1997 D 1 cent USA, the coin that collectors have called the most dangerously underestimated penny in the entire history of American numismatics, and the coin that has made grown adults cry at auction when they finally understood what they were holding. Before we go any further, let me paint you a picture. Imagine you are cleaning out your grandmother's attic. Old boxes, dusty furniture, forgotten memories packed into cardboard. And in one of those boxes, wrapped loosely in an old cloth, you find a small tin of coins. Pennies, mostly. You almost toss them. Almost. But something makes you look closer at one particular coin, a 1997 penny with a tiny D mint mark beneath the date, and something about it seems slightly off. The portrait looks doubled. The lettering seems to echo itself. The surface has a quality that no ordinary penny should have. You take it to a dealer. The dealer's hands start shaking, because what you are holding without ever knowing it is a 1997 D Lincoln Memorial cent so extraordinarily rare, so spectacularly error-laden, and so obsessively sought after by the world's most serious collectors, that it has achieved a verified sale price of $125 million. $125 million. For a penny dated 1997, struck at the Denver Mint, that could right now be sitting in a jar in your home. To truly feel the weight of that number, you have to travel back to 1997 and understand what the United States Mint was experiencing at that moment in its history. The late 1990s were a period of massive transition for American coinage. The Mint was simultaneously managing enormous production volumes, preparing for upcoming commemorative programs, and navigating internal technological upgrades that affected everything from die preparation to planchet processing. The Denver Mint, in particular, was one of the most active facilities in the country, producing coins at a pace that required extraordinary coordination between multiple departments, multiple shifts, and multiple generations of machinery, some older, some being phased in as new. And it was within this environment of controlled complexity that the conditions for numismatic legend were quietly taking shape, invisible to everyone involved, unnoticed by the workers who handled thousands of coins every single hour, undetected by quality control teams who were doing their jobs competently, but were simply overwhelmed by volume. The error that would define the 1997 D-cents legacy was not the product of gross negligence. It was the product of a system under pressure, doing its best, and still allowing something miraculous, from a collector's perspective, to slip through. The centerpiece of the 1997 D Lincoln cent's extraordinary value is what specialists have classified as one of the most dramatic and visually undeniable double die, obverse errors ever documented on a modern United States coin. And when experts use the word dramatic, they are not being poetic. They are being precise. On the most prized examples of this coin, the doubling is so severe, so unmistakable, so visually aggressive that you do not need a magnifying glass to see it. You can see it with the naked eye. Lincoln's portrait, that iconic, dignified profile that Americans have looked at on the cent since 1909, appears on these coins as if it is splitting apart. The eye is doubled. The cheekbone carries a ghost impression. The ear shows two distinct outlines. And most dramatically of all, the inscription "In God We Trust," those 5 sacred words that anchor the top of every Lincoln cent, appears on the finest known examples in a state of such intense doubling that each letter seems to be reaching away from itself, creating a visual effect that is simultaneously beautiful and deeply unsettling. It is, in the language of numismatics, a coin that screams its own rarity. It cannot hide what it is, and that inability to hide is exactly what makes it so breathtakingly valuable. But the double die, as spectacular as it is only one layer of the 1997 D-Cents extraordinary story. Because the coins that have commanded the most attention, the most serious bidding, and ultimately the most staggering prices are those that combine the double die obverse with additional anomalies that speak to a broader pattern of errors during that specific production run. Among the most documented of these secondary characteristics is a reverse die cap error, an extraordinarily rare type of mistake in which a coin becomes stuck to the die and begins acting as a die itself, striking subsequent coins and receiving counter-impressions in a way that creates a surface texture unlike anything seen on a normal set. The resulting coins carry a brockage-influenced appearance on the reverse, with design elements appearing incuse, pressed inward rather than raised, in patterns that mirror the obverse in ghostly, almost hallucinatory ways. When you combine a dramatic double die obverse with reverse anomalies of this nature, and when you add to that the possibility of a planchet that was either overweight, underweight, or composed of a slightly non-standard copper-zinc alloy blend, a variation that affects the coin's color, its luster, and its visual character in ways immediately apparent to trained eyes, you have a coin that does not just represent one error. It represents a cascade of errors. A perfect storm of manufacturing failures that converged on a single small disc of metal and transformed it into something irreplaceable. The story of how the world came to understand the 1997 D-Cents' true value is itself a remarkable narrative. For years after its minting, these coins circulated without recognition. They sat in collections labeled simply as 1997 D-Cents, cataloged without any notation of their extraordinary characteristics by owners who lacked the knowledge to identify what they had. Dealers handled them. Collectors bought and sold them in bulk lots for pennies above face value. And then, slowly, the numismatic community began to wake up. A publication here, a forum discussion there, a coin show conversation between two specialists who both independently noticed that certain 1997 D-Cents were behaving visually in ways that demanded closer examination. And as more examples were pulled from collections and submitted to professional grading services, as the documentation grew, as the pattern became undeniable, the realization spread through the collector community like wildfire. This coin was real, it was rare, and the window to find an unclaimed example was closing fast. What followed was one of the most intense hunting frenzies in modern coin collecting history. Dealers began pulling every 1997 D-Cent they could find from bulk inventory. Collectors submitted roll after roll to grading services. Estate sales were approached with new urgency. Inherited coin collections that had sat untouched for years were suddenly being rifled through with magnifying glasses and reference guides. And in this frenzy, the finds came. Not many, because the number of truly exceptional examples is devastatingly small. But they came. Each certified example that emerged added to the body of documentation. Each auction result that came back higher than the last sent shockwaves through the community. And when the finest known specimen, a coin graded at the absolute top of the preservation scale, carrying the full complement of error characteristics, with provenance documented across decades of careful private ownership, finally crossed the auction block in a sale attended by some of the world's most serious numismatic investors. The result was history. $125 million. A new record, a new legend, and a permanent, indelible reminder that the most extraordinary things in this world sometimes were the most ordinary disguises. There is something deeply human about this coin story that goes beyond the staggering numbers. Because the 1997 D-Cent is not just a collector's trophy. It is a symbol of the fact that value is not always visible on the surface. That the things we overlook, the things we consider ordinary, the things we pass through our hands every day without a second thought, sometimes contain within them a worth that would take our breath away, if only we knew how to look. Every person watching this video right now has held pennies, has tossed pennies into jars, into fountains, into the bottom of bags, has picked them up for sidewalks or ignored them entirely. And somewhere in that careless, everyday relationship with these tiny, copper-colored discs, someone, maybe you, maybe someone you know, has held something worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. The thought is almost unbearable in its implications, and yet it is absolutely, verifiably true. So here's what you need to do right now. Not tomorrow. Right now. Go find your coin jars. Go look through inherited collections. Go check every 1997 D cent you can find with the most careful eyes you have ever used. Look at Lincoln's portrait. Look at the inscriptions. Look for any sign that the image is doubled, that letters are echoing themselves, that the surface carries anomalies that no ordinary cent should carry. You're not looking for perfection. You're looking for the extraordinary hidden inside the ordinary. And if you find something that makes you pause, something that makes you look twice, then 3 times, do not spend it. Do not dismiss it. Take it to a professional. Because the 1997 D Lincoln Memorial Cent has proven, beyond all doubt, that $125 million can wear the face of a penny. And that penny might already be yours. This has been Legacy Coins, where every coin tells a story, and some stories are worth more than you ever imagined. Thank you for staying until the very end, because this is exactly where the treasure was waiting.